Creative Manifestation. Today I wanted to talk about why we struggle with going gray and how we don't have to struggle. We struggle because we have bought into the idea that, gray hair is bad, basically. And it's funny to look back on, I don't know if you've ever looked back on like old magazines or ads from like the maybe 50s it was, and how, the gray hair stuff was like happening then, and even just like fashion magazines and, all of the stuff that we kind of got brainwashed with, be this way to attract a man, like all this stuff, like all this crap that we get influenced by. And I want to talk about the power of influence a little bit because you're so influenced. And I've read a lot of stuff about this, like programming and how we're programmed from age 0 to 7 and around a lot of little children. And if you see how they're influenced just to live into the family system, we've all probably seen this. Like, that's why we learn the language we learn, is because we are taught the language we're taught by mimicking the people in our reality. We don't know that though on a conscious level. We're subconsciously being programmed with this stuff. And so this is why we struggle to go gray, because we've been subconsciously programmed from such a young age to think gray hair is bad, to think that we should cover it up, to think it makes us look old, which I want to talk about that a little bit too, because first of all, we have a very ageist society, first of all. But second of all, it's our value. This is why it's so hard for women to go gray, I feel like, and to age in general. It's because we have most of our value is placed on how we look. This is very deeply ingrained in us for many, many, many centuries, because women had no rights. I mean, we didn't even have a right to our own bank account. I think it was until the 1970s, which was, I think it was like the year before I was born, that women could have their own bank account without a man's signature. 1976 or 1974. I was born in 75. It was either the year before I was born. I think it might have been the year before I was born. This wasn't that long ago. About this in terms of women's value, what we were valued for. And, back in the 1800s, most women were either prostitutes or they were someone's wife, because they couldn't really be anything else. This is like deeply ingrained in us, this value for our looks. Marriage initially was a form of exchange for, like, a woman was property. That's why women take the man's name, because they were considered their property. Now, this might be controversial and people might not want to hear this, but it's the truth. So this is where all this stuff came from. So of course, deeply ingrained in us is this need and desire to be attractive, and that is what makes us worthy in our society, in our lives, in our relationship. And if we stop being attractive, what does that mean for us? This need to survive, this need to be able to live, and that's linked to our physical body feeling safe. And so if we don't feel safe, that's really ultimately instinct, is to feel safe, is to be protected, is to be loved, is to be cared for. If you lose that worth in the world, then what do you have? And so this is why we struggle so hard with aging, with going gray, with all of this stuff, because in society, those things are thought of as bad. They're thought of as wrong. They're thought of as less than, unattractive, whatever you want to call it. Although we know this isn't true. I've reprogrammed myself into seeing gray hair as really awesome and beautiful and cool. And so I don't think that anymore. I don't think that going gray makes you look older or makes you look unattractive. I don't think that at all, actually. But these are the reasons we struggle to embrace this process, because we have to walk through this the programming that's so deeply ingrained in us, and the lack of security we feel about losing the thing that we are considered valuable for. And so it's a very deep, and what I want to say about this is because we have a lot of value that has nothing to do with our appearance and what we offer the world. I think it's like how much we put into that, how much value we put on that we feel worthy for. Do we feel worthy outside of our looks and youthfulness? And that's something that's really kind of been robbed from us in our culture that we have to reclaim for ourselves. And the Going Gray process brings these things up, even if we don't know that they're being brought up. But when we go through this questioning and the doubting and am I going to like this? And do I feel okay with myself? Do I feel good about myself? And how much we put value on that, it's all tied together. You know, this is why we struggle with it. This is why we have to look at kind of these things within us. You might take the trip, take the journey to the gray hair and then say, I can't do this. Even once you're in it, even once you've gone, done the grow out, you're buying into that being your worth. That's your safety and security and your foundation. Then even if you go through the grow out, we have to go to the bottom of it, really. We have to get to the bottom of why we feel like we're only valued for our external. And that's absolutely not true. And we have to reclaim that for ourselves because in our history, that was the case. That was the case. So we carry that within us. We carry that trauma and we carry those wounds of the past through our generations of women in our societies, through our mothers, through our grandmothers, through, our lineage. And these are the things that I really want to overcome in my life. And, it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing to do. But what's the alternative? That's really the question that I like to ask. What's the alternative? The alternative is masking, really, this trauma. It's masking the trauma. It's masking the feelings of unworthiness within us and just trying to get through it instead of really embracing it, instead of really loving ourselves. Thinking about it in terms of like trees, because the only reason a tree really dies is if a tree is cut down or it gets a disease, right? Aging itself is kind of this thing that has been imposed on us in a sense. Now, I know this might sound a little out there, but we buy into the idea of, this decline. We buy into this because of time, because of the construct of time and the fact that we buy into the idea of time, which was actually just constructed by man anyway. I mean, yes, there are cycles to the universe because we have the sun rising and falling and the seasons and things like that. But if we were really just like a tree, just expanding and growing and evolving into a greater version of ourselves, and we're not declining, it's not a negative thing. It's an expansion. It's an evolution. We're evolving into another phase. Like a tree, starts off as a sapling and grows and growing, as long as it grows until it gets chopped down or it gets a disease. Or what makes us different? Yes, we're not trees, we're people, but what really makes us different than that is the question. So anyway, it's just a little something to think about. And I like to think of the gray hair journey as an expansion into another version of ourselves that's not less than. It's not bad. It's not worse. It's not declining. It's not negative. It's what we decided it, and we put that value on. And so we have to change that value. We have to start reclaiming the stuff for ourselves and making new rules for our lives. We can't let other people or other systems make these rules for us. We have to make our own rules for ourselves, and that's individual. It's not, it doesn't have to be a collective thing, but, it's easier when it's a collective thing because everyone, accepts accepts it as the norm, as okay, as acceptable. But, I don't think we should try to like change everyone's minds, because some people are never going to buy into it, and that's fine. But maybe they're just not your people, There's a lot to be said about this topic, and there's a lot of like deeply rooted stuff that goes along with this. I wanted to talk about the subject a little bit. I know it's like a little bit of a deeper subject, but if you like this content, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.